Hey, this is your time, our time, your time. Yeah, great.
So one of my friends attended a seminar at some point in time, which I'm gonna say is wrong, name wrong probably, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
And she said that one of the things he had, like a little practice he had given them, was to, when they're breathing in, to relax their body, and when they're breathing out, to smile. And then, so I was doing that, and it felt really good, and then I just kind of felt like, this just doesn't seem right, you know? I'm like, I feel like I'm working from the outside in and not really appreciating that maybe I should just experience what I'm, like, all the junkiness that I'm just feeling, you know? And then I was like, well, those are just two different practices, and I didn't really know how to find balance, or, you know, and yeah.
Yeah. You know, there are 84,000 teachings, they say, in the that the Buddha gave.
Okay.
So Thich Nhat Hanh comes from a different lineage, Chinese Chan. We honor it, it's beautiful. There are many, many beings who've become realized beings, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, following that lineage. It's not the lineage we're in here.
No, like, it's just
So your question is so good. We're supposed to be repeating the question. She raised a method that Thich Nhat Hanh has taught when you're doing calm abiding, or I'm not even sure he would call it that because I don't know that lineage so well. But this is, and then some resistance, first liking, then resistance, and some confusion seems to have arisen, like boom, boom, boom. And this is really important because as the Dharma comes to the West and keeps coming, we're getting everything. We're getting everything. And it's fantastic that we're getting everything. But one of our tasks is to sort that out in a very common sense way. So we have to just be aware. You know, there's many lineages, and the Tibetan Buddhist Kagyu lineage that we're in here is one of just the Tibetan ones. Then you're going to get to China and Japan and Sri Lanka and, you know, Burma, and it's all Buddhism. It's all the same trunk of the tree, and then the branches are quite different. So we're sitting on a certain branch, you know, and it's good for us to know that. We don't have to deeply research everything, but to just, you know, it's what does my teacher say? Smorgasbord. You know, smorgasbords, you go in, and does everybody know what that is? It's like this buffet with Italian and, you know, Scandinavian and, you know, Polish and Irish and everything there, and Thai, and you eat them all together, and you kind of go, wow, what did I do? And we really have kind of a Dharma smorgasbord going here. And it's just good to know, okay, that's Thai food, and do I really want to mix it with Italian? You might want to, that's fine. But you just want to know, that's what I'm doing. And there will be effects. So, so it's this question about, okay, you have this lifetime, all right? Might end today. Okay, so we have to really figure out, for me, what I've done is go, I am going to go as deep as I can into Tibetan Buddhism. And I came in through the Gelug twig, and now looking at the kagyu twig. Actually, I came in through the kagyu, then to the gelu, but oh, that doesn't matter. They are different, but that's plenty for me. It's huge. I can barely hold on to that twig. You know, it's like the wind is blowing and I'm kind of holding on, doing my practice, getting lost, not doing it, finding it. It will take me many lifetimes to just get this.
Yeah.
Get is a funny word, but you know what I'm saying. So then, if something shows up from Thich Nhat Hanh, which I've read some beautiful prayers from him, I just take it, bow, and let it go, because I don't have the time, energy, and concentration to follow that path and this one. Well, it's all the same path, it's more different methods. That's also a Mahayana path with bodhicitta. I mean, I've studied just that much to know it's a Mahayana path. So maybe that's enough to say. Is that?
I guess my question also is, so how do you balance like relaxing and just doing stuff kind of like make yourself feel good kind of stuff versus the just being present with your experience and letting that unfold without having an agenda?
Yeah. Well, you know what? The Dharma's not about feeling better. It's just not. We are also really stuck about that. This should make me feel better. Nope. You know, the whole point is to wake up. And the point of waking up is to end suffering. To end suffering, we have to really know suffering. That's not a pleasant process. We have to know the suffering in our minds, in our bodies, in our speech. Yeah, so sometimes sitting on the cushion is blissful. Sometimes it's hell realm. Sometimes it's hungry ghost. Sometimes it's total confusion. Sometimes it's clear again. And the awareness of that is always there, but clouded. And when we sit here, we're simply trying to connect with that awareness, which is in us. It's not somewhere else. It's not like we're going to develop something that we've never had before. So that second thing you said about it, when you said, well, maybe instead I should drop that, the Thich Nhat Hanh, breathe and smile. And maybe I should just be here with what's rising. That's the method we're using here. Now, it doesn't mean you never, try those other things, but you want to know, I'm not doing the thing we usually do here or the main practice. I'm going to try Thich Nhat Hanh's, breathe and smile. Good. Just know that's what you're doing. Does that help? Because otherwise we end up in this smush. And I want to stop talking because other people want to add.
Well, I just wanted to add to that, to remember that we also have a whole part of our practice, like in the beginning, the reflections that Zopa led us through. You could sit with that for longer. You could sit with the mind training slogan, be grateful to everyone, which is kind of like smiling in a way. That could be a carrying practice, or that could be a sitting practice. But so we do, and on. We have many, many contemplations that might elicit something. Again, I'm not saying what that practice is because I haven't studied it about the smiling, but when I experiment with that, I feel like we have things that would help that side, and that we have to remember we have the Buddhism nutshell: avoid harm, do positive things and know your mind. So part of the positive activity is cultivating the positive within our mind stream. So that we do have that active work. But at the same time, our calm abiding meditation, we would encourage people to do contemplations, before you start the calm abiding practice. Or anyway, in your session, use part of your time for planting the positive things, cultivating. But then our methods for calm abiding are more geared to more of them anyway, are geared to just letting be what is.
Yeah,
and not
thank you.
putting the effort.
Thank you, Dora. The feeling good, your own self. When I say so strongly, Dharma is not about feeling good. Dharma is about practicing, but the feeling good, though it's not the goal, seems to come from just do the practice. If it was total torture, none of you would show up, and you wouldn't sit down on your cushion, and we wouldn't show up either. So, it's not like self-sacrifice, it's not like that. But to have the goal of I'm doing this so I will feel good, that's totally stuck somewhere around the I. So it's quite limited. It's not even a Mahayana motivation. That's why we're always talking about expand it. Just like you want to feel good, just like you want freedom from suffering, so does she, so does he. Just like that. Not one speck different. And then the whole, who is this I anyway, that wants all these things and is going to try and get them at the expense of others usually. It's really important to keep investigating who is that. You want to add anything, Mr. Bill?
I would first of all, I would doubt that Thich Nhat Hanh would put this practice in the same container as calm abiding.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more in the container that Dora was talking about in terms of. So we have the cultivation of loving kindness. We have slogans like "Always rely on a joyful mind." We have all kinds of things, and there's two aspects to purification. One is the recognizing what is arising and not being trapped in that. There's the other part, which is the active cultivation of positive relationships and positive mental formations. So this one, to say that where the balance is, it's not sort of like this balance between feeling good and feeling bad, but it's actually certain kinds of things do allow us to see through what's arising, and other things actually fill us with conditions that are more fruitful for our relationships with our own experience and also with others. And both of those, this is, in a certain sense, you could say, oh, it always gets down to the union of relative and ultimate bodhicitta.
Because it does. Appearance and emptiness. But the appearance of the I, the self, is so strong that we can even hijack our dharma. The I takes over the practice and does it for the I, and builds the I, the ego I, the not healthy ego I. So this is something that we just get aware of, and work with. And sitting in calm abiding, you get such an opportunity to see it. It's just yapping away, yapping away. This morning in the calm abiding at one point, it was just like this other little being sitting here. And all of a sudden, when I woke up, too, I was listening, kind of getting caught. And then I went, blah, blah, blah. And I almost laughed out loud because it was like, yeah, oh, I got to tell you about, oh, and that, and this, and oh, the future and the past, and then, oh, the neon announcement, oh, yeah. It was just like, blah, 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 blah. Leave me alone, you know. And so we don't practice for ourselves, not that self. But we're included in all beings who we wish freedom from suffering. Really good question to work with. Yeah, Sue.
So Zopa, I want to ask a question that builds off of yours. In your in your description of bodhicitta this morning, you spoke about the interdependence between one's own enlightenment and the enlightenment of all beings, or one's own benefit and practicing for the benefit of all beings. And I was really struck by your description there of the relationships there as being interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love you to unpack that more for us. Okay, so how and why does that arise? And how do we work with that, recognizing and understanding those interdependencies and interlinkages? Why are they important? How does that inform and deepen our practice? How does it anchor our practice?
Interdependence. Well, you know, when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he just saw how things are. He wasn't adding anything. And he didn't. In our confusion, we always add things to reality, or we don't see something that's arising. But the awakening is about not doing that. So interdependence just is. You can't get away from it. We are it. How did this arise? Even, let's just take the physical body, sperm and egg of my mother and father. Where'd they come from? Earth and eggs, back beginningless time. This one then is connected to all that. Then all the food that's been given, all the medicine, or I would have died, all the education, or I couldn't talk. I mean, it's really bad. It's so vast. If you just peel it a little bit, you're into it. So most of the day we don't notice that. I'm going to buy my groceries over there, and it's my money, and it's my choices, and it's all me, mine, and we're stuck in that little bubble, and it's not very happy because it's not in line with reality. The more we get in line with reality, the more the joy just comes, the ease comes, because we're stepping away from the confusion. So we don't really have to, I don't know, we just are it. We are it. We are everybody, you know, and we are everything, and we just don't experience that. And the more we can use the three wisdoms of study, contemplation, and meditation to clear the confusion, then we just know it. Now, I don't know if I'm even close to what you're.
No, I think all of those kind of foundational kind of layers make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So then, when in the context of the Bodhisattva vow, so which is a commitment to the benefit of all sentient beings,
Right, to wake up.
to wake up.
Yeah.
Right. So then one's own awakening is interdependent with the awakening of all sentient beings.
Well, sure. 'Cause
Well, that's
you-
the Welsh shore. That's the Welsh shore. Why is the awakening? Because it comes down to questions of one's intention and why one practices.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So we're laughing because it's a good question.
Right. So it's you know, I could sit and practice with the intention of my own awakening.
Yeah.
And I would be sitting here with my own benefit purely and beautifully circled and cordoned off in mind.
Well, not really.
And, no, right, exactly.
Because you
Okay,
can't
and I go
cordon
down,
off.
and it would be, you know, I'd be like down a vortex, down a plug hole.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the interdependence between a single being's awakening and all beings' awakening that I want to understand.
Yeah, and I'm sensing Bill having a really good piece here. But and I just want to say before that, there is no way to cordon yourself off.
Right.
And therefore,
Right.
it's that language just stumps us. There is no separate you that is going to be awakened without affecting. We can't do anything. When I get angry, it affects everyone. Even I'm up in my room all alone, and I get angry, it's affecting the entire universe. And in a moment, I practice loving kindness. It affects the entire universe. We don't really believe this because we're so materialistic and scientific. Like, how can that be? You know? And we have to kind of give up that wanting to get those little scientific, precise things. Because they will stymie us also, make it too small. So you were making, why I thought you had something and you were going.
It is, Patrick gets a little bit more afraid.
And whenever those kind of, then I go, okay, what's that hum about, Bill?
Did I hum?
Well, it sounds like.
Maybe I'm snoring. No.
Could have been. What do you think
What do I think? Okay.
about Sue's question?
Well, it's. I think it's a question that is takes a very long time to come up with this something that suits our intellectual aesthetic.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of words to do that. And some of the words that we use to get started eventually get in the way of going any farther, because we get started with stories about history. Kind of where did it all, how does it all come together, and this depended on that, and this wouldn't have happened without that. But that all tends to actually solidify something in a comforting way up to a certain point, and then it stops being comforting at a certain point, because you have to sort of say, well, as long as, if I take all these solid objects and these little tinker toy connections between the solid objects, and then say, if I push this enlightenment button in my little tinker toy node, what actually goes out through these tinker toys to all the other nodes? And it starts, well, we don't have an explanation for that relationship, so therefore it's not scientific to say that. But I'm not sure whether it is or isn't, but it's a different perspective. It's a different perspective. And I think we have to shift to a point where we're actually experiencing more and more of the play of interdependence in our own mind stream, in our own experience directly, before we start to see something about how this could be. I think it's really not particularly satisfying to go too far down the road intellectually. But one thing that I think is helpful is to take the intellectual exercise one step farther, instead of looking just at this kind of like the strings that interdependence as this thing that invokes history and a history of objects and relationships, and also kind of that kind of object relationship, to think about and we live in that world. Like, I walked in the door of this house, which has been here for a while. It was here yesterday and it's here today. And that works all quite well. But there is also a way in which there isn't anything in that frame of reference that is actually true, in a certain sense, about what's going on right at the moment. Everything that appears to be stable in the moment is stable only because all other conditions are interacting in a certain way. There isn't these things that we say, table, object, me, even at a scientific level, it's kind of quivering on the edge of it's staying the way it is just because everything else is kind of moving in the same relationship with it. And when we start to look in our own mind stream and feel that, as opposed to feel ourselves separate, like the node and the tinker toy with the spokes going out, then that shifts. We step outside of this sense of history and fixed objects in relationship. And once we start to do that and look into our own experience and see our own experience more from that light, to step outside of, it's one reason that there's the instruction given in calm abiding, don't brood about the past, don't plan about the future, don't make up stories about what's going on, to step outside of that frame of reference so that you can actually feel the moment-to-moment unfolding. And even the words like moment-to-moment unfolding start to become kind of suspect. But if you just kind of let go of all the stories, and then use the experience as the door into it, then I think it's actually otherwise it takes a huge amount of ink and paper to come up with something that's intellectually satisfying. And it's really an aesthetic. It's an intellectual aesthetic that we're like, oh, that's the kind of painting that I like. And I have to acknowledge that I have a highly developed intellectual aesthetic that really loves certain kinds of things to be spelled out in exactly a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I love filling in those stories with things that just, oh yeah, that fits so nicely, or that completely obliterates this thing and supplants it by something that's even more spectacularly satisfying. Okay. And then Dora says something, the slightest bit unexpected. What?
Still experiencing.
Still going at it.
And yet, just to confuse things perhaps, but hopefully not, we do need to work between the pot of the experience and the pot of contemplation and study. That's why we have all three wisdom. So that's why we do this here. It's words piled out on concept, but every single tradition says ultimately it's experience beyond concept. Imagine that. Experiences beyond concept. You may think, oh, that's simple. Do you think that's simple? We live in concept and words and thoughts. Make them so solid. Experience beyond concept. One of the things that kind of helps me with it is, we can't describe to someone when we eat a pickle. We could say words. It's sour, it's sweet, it's crunchy, but we can't give them our experience. There is no words that will give the experience. Are people getting the difference? You have your experience and it has no words. So this is the go back and forth between experiential and conceptual. Yeah.
I've often gotten confused with this whole thing too. When you learn about Buddhism, it's one of the first things people try to explain, which is probably bad. And Michael long ago said something that was really valuable to me in all Buddhist things, which is understanding that there's the fruit and the path. And part of the confusion that makes us not apprehend the connectivity, interconnectivity, is the confusion itself. So the path is different than the fruit, which will be this kind of other experience, which we can't manufacture while we're still having the confusion. So we work with trying to observe interconnectivity, but it's not possible. This is the hopeful thing for me. It's not possible, and it's not a fault of the practitioner not to just experience the lack of confusion and the experience of all the interconnectivity. So anyway, I don't know. Fruit and path was one thing that made me gave me a little bit of a break from feeling like I had to practice the fruit, which was impossible.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Because the fruit is the path, too. I mean, the practice.
The experience of the fruit is not the path. I mean, the experience, like the manufacturing the clarity is
Yeah,
not something that you
manufacturing
can
versus actually experiencing.
do. Yeah.
Okay, now, Dora
I
wants
just
to
want to say one
talk
thing.
in.
Ringo Tokol's little book, that really little tiny book on emptiness, addresses this specifically. Everything that you're saying in a very beautiful and concise way. So it's right there. You can buy it in our bookstore.
Okay, for those on streaming, there's a
Emptiness.
recommendation for Ringo Tokol's very small pocketbook on emptiness.
Yeah.
Dora.
Well, I think that piece is important, what people have been saying, that the profundity is, in the non-conceptual side, is important. And I do have a piece of the science that I feel is relevant. I mean, to me, it seems relevant now. Maybe it'd be interesting to see if people think it's not. What I see is, for instance, if you're in an experience, imagine I feel like I've been in experiences like this. I haven't been in a road rage instance, I don't think, but that just seems like the right thing. Like, you suddenly are in a situation with a stranger, and in the space of a very short time, some little action that one of you does triggers an immense reaction in the other person. Now, where does that come from? It obviously doesn't come from that little moment there. It comes from whatever the reactor has been doing in their room or in their world, in their minds, in their what have they been cultivating, what have I been cultivating if I suddenly explode at someone for the littlest thing or something that has nothing to do with even what they meant, or, and I'm suddenly, where did that come from? That came from what I was practicing in my little mind, in my little room, So to me, if we can look, it's easy to see those negative examples, but what about a positive one? What would it be? What about, like, our teachers? What about Lama Michael? What about, Kempo Lodrodunyo Rinpoche, Ringu Toku? How often, what are they able to do in the world? and why are they able to do it more than some of the rest of us? And I feel it comes from what they've cultivated in their minds, in their bubbles, in their, seemingly separate from other people, spending 3 years somewhere with, whatever handful of people that they're not. So, to me, there is that tangible part of how you can see that, I have a hard time saying the person in the room right now is affecting me, but certainly when they come out and say something to me, I'm going to have an experience as a result of that. And if we have beings who are actually free of all this that we're entangled in, good heavens, they can do things I can't even dream of, I think. And so the sense of, and they affect others. So I do feel that's, that linkage of somebody's cultivation, work towards enlightenment and everybody else's enlightenment does, to me, have a little bit of a tangible side.
Yeah, that's the relative, ultimate relative, and we just work back and forth with our limited understanding. And I just want to add a sentence to what you said, Dora. So we look at them and we go, wow, Ringo Toku, whoever, what they write, how they go around the world. And then they say to us, if you say to them, how did you get that way? Then they give us these practices. So this is where that faith based on reason, we do cultivate faith in this path, based on reason. And the reason is looking at effects, fruit, and going, oh, maybe if I do shamatha, maybe if I do 4 immeasurables, then, they are saying that's how I got this kind of mind. Someone had something over here, Margaret.
I was just going to say that, interestingly, physicists are talking about this as well, and it's a theory called entanglements. So if you want to learn more about it from a scientific perspective and just kind of contrast that, it's called entanglement.
Okay, so for the streamers, Margaret pointed out in science with physicists, there's a new, new old phrase, entanglements, pointing at interdependence. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you can look at that. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Along these lines, a certain empiricism that we can bring to bear on this, a certain being with experience, and whether it regards that experience as a fact. And so I was remembering when I was in Bodh with some people who were here, and it was a really, really poor place, very difficult conditions, and very dangerous as well to be on the streets in Bodh because it's just so confusing, there's so much happening. And then there was this place where the Buddha attained enlightenment. In the middle of this mess, there's this place, right? And so my experience at that place was remarkable to me because I felt completely safe and completely at peace and completely natural, And I thought, what is this? This is, I don't know what that is, but I think about the interdependence, the profundity of that, the way that this experience at this distant time in history, at this distant place, can be so effective now. And then for so many, many, many people, So for me, that kind of answers the question about the fact of the effect of one person's enlightenment on others.
Yeah, thank you. And and it's experiential. You can't put words on it, nor should you try. I mean, they often say when we have experiences like that, if we try to describe them and talk about them now, suddenly it becomes very solid conceptual and we can ruin our experience. So I'm really appreciative you shared that. It's just a good example of, and then sometimes it seems, in my experience, it seems more experiential to live with the question. Like you said, how can this be? You know, this chaos of Gaia and all this, and then my experience. How can this be? Sometimes the question leads us more to the experience than when we go to an answer. Yeah, Eric, you.
I like that, because my experience with this is that there's a part of me that's always, and I'm borrowing this phrase from Norman Fisher, always threatening to figure it out. It never quite gets there, but it's I was always like, maybe if I just like think about it a little more, then I'll get it. And but that's never happened. But I continuously have this experience that I'm about to get it. And so I kind of think, so last week Bill said something that I thought was just profoundly true. And it was, I don't remember exactly what you were talking about. It might have been emptiness. But you said, it's not what you think it is. And I was like, that's true of everything. Nothing is what you think it is. Like it's I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not what you can definitely say for sure. It's not what you're thinking it is. Like what you're thinking it is your thinking. Like so, it's by definition not that. So interdependence is not what you think it is.
Yeah, or what we say it is. Yeah.
But I think, and not to, I mean, I think it's kind of fun to try to parse it out in words or try to pin it down. I think it's a useful exercise. But for me, the less you say about it, or like the fewer words that you're able to articulate it, the better. And so like Thich Nhat Hanh, he doesn't call it interdependence, because interdependence is a thing. And he wants to say, no, it's a verb. So he calls it interbeing.
Oh yeah, interbeing.
And he creates this really awkward language on purpose, like we inter-are. And but which I think, it torques our. You're like, oh no, you can't say that. But that's that's the point. And it gets to how fundamentally our language, like this whole thing, it's not what you think it is. Well, we think everything that we think is what we think it is. So there's a French poet who has a famous phrase, that I think is my favorite description of interdependence, and it is, I is other.
Except that might be a threat to figure it out.
Well, that's what you get by just sitting. Just sitting with your experiences, you start to see I is other.
Yeah. And you start experiencing it. Yeah. And then you can't really describe it. And the question about the effect on one another is experienced. Yeah. Last question, I think, because of time.
Maybe
Marcy.
it's more of a toss-in to the discussion. But I was thinking about Lama Michael's teaching about everyone that you meet during the day, imagining that they're your previous mother. That's sort of like an experiential exercise to give you maybe be some experience of interconnectivity. So instead of thinking about it, like actually, and when I've done that, it has been really interesting how my experience is when I do that, like walking down the street or going to the store. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there as another way to.
Yeah, another way to go toward the experience. It's very helpful. Everyone's been my mother, and if mother doesn't work, my little brother, my little sister, my kid. And it just shifts the experience if we really carry it. Yeah.
All of these things can. Yeah, I think that's one of the great things. It's not like, no, that's not interdependence. This is,
Yeah.
oh no, that's just the low-hanging fruit of the. It's like, whatever aspect of the contemplation kind of allows you to open some doors, that's great. However you're exploring it, however you're articulating it to yourself, if it opens doors, then that's the transformative thing of the moment, and that's really good. So sometimes we can look at books that are very sophisticated, and we get the idea that somebody actually has made good on the threat to explain it all, and that's the real thing. And then what we're up to really isn't. And I think that's unfortunate, because then we can undercut. We could have the experience that you were talking about, and that's, oh, but that's not good enough. That's, it's like we would miss the potential.
We're almost at the end. I did want to mention that back when you and Bill and Dora were doing the 4 turnings, or 3 turnings? 3 turnings. There were 4 lessons, 3 turnings. You had said something that I wrote down somewhere, and it's something to the effect of, and so into this bottomless well of attempting to understand, we throw more concepts.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And yet we need to contemplate, or we're just lost in space. So we work between. Thank you.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thanks, everyone. And what time is the training?
11:30.
11:30. Where? Here?
Right here.
Right here. 11:30. If you can stay. Or about me on.